Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
This is the Networking RX podcast. Welcome back for another episode. I am Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections and your host for this program. I was in a Zoom call. I think we've all kind of experienced these over the last 2 years. I've been in several. There are lots out there. Some are better than others. Some are really great. But at any rate, I was in one, and someone started a conversation or shared with us. Actually, the person is J.D. Gershbein. J.D. is in the Chicago area. J.D. is a LinkedIn expert. He is someone who is versed in, I don't want to say theater, but improv. Does a lot of improv in the Chicago area. And at any rate, he was sharing with the group, and I hadn't heard this term before, kind of knew it was out there, but hadn't heard this term before, parasocial relationships or parasocial interactions. And essentially what a parasocial relationship is just a relationship that we have with someone, but we really don't know them. And I'm on Wikipedia here. Parasocial interactions, PSI, refers to a kind of sociological relationship experienced by an audience in their encounters with performers in mass media, particularly on television and online platforms. In other words, I guess continue on. Viewers or listeners come to consider these media personalities as friends despite having no or limited interactions with them. Certainly sounds familiar. And I think this has probably been going on for years, arguably long before television and radio. People, knew their kings and their queens or whoever, they knew their rulers or felt they knew them, felt they had interaction just because word of their evil or their benevolence or things they had done, urban legend, whatever, had kind of made its way through, and people had felt that they knew these people. There's not a lot out there on this, but while there's not a lot out there on this, this term was coined in 1956 by a gentleman by the name of Donald Horton and Richard Wall, and they talk about this illusionary experience, with people, whether it's talk show hosts or celebrities, fictional characters, and today even social media influencers. And we tend to, or people do, and I think some people are more guilty than others of engaging in reciprocal relationships with these people. Hence, that's why people become influencers, because the reciprocity of the situation is you're listening to them and taking their suggestions. You might start to align your politics or your views with them. You might start to make purchases or like certain things, certain foods, based on the types of things that they're suggesting, because you feel as if you have a relationship with them. So this is something that's, I think been around for a while. Probably as long as humans have been around, and there have been people that we have kind of heard about. I mean, even if you lived way back when we were in tribes of about 150, you kind of knew everybody, but you didn't really know everybody. And there were certain people that you had a really close relationship with. It might have been a spouse or children or parents. And then there were other people who was less close, but still there. You're still in the tribe, and if you knew the person who was the tribal leader, if you will, and I use the term tribe loosely, it could be clan, whatever organization you want to call it, but while nobody knows everybody really well, essentially, but you might know people or see interactions with people and feel like you know them, feel like you can kind of predict what they're about. The the reality is that parasocial relationships, parasocial interactions are real. They're just not real relationships. They're just people that we, those who I guess buy into them, and maybe we're all a little bit guilty of this. I mean, I don't follow influencers on Instagram or Facebook. Certainly not with any consistency. Certainly, there are things I watch on YouTube and feel like I have a level of not a level of knowledge, a level of relationship. I trust what people have to say. Um, I still form my own opinions on things, but I'm interested in the things that they uncover. And that's probably again been around for a while. Walter Cronkite, did the CBS Evening News, and then Dan Rather, and there've been a host of other people. But Walter Cronkite, and for me at least, was one of the originals coming in. Okay, if Walter Cronkite is saying it, then you know what, you can kind of just rest assured. And I still remember when Walter Cronkite signed off for the last time. It's like, okay, now what? Where do we go from here? It was like kind of losing a loved one. But the reason why I wanted to kind of bring this up into conversation, at least draw attention to it. I was interested in when JD had said something about it, and obviously it caused me to pull up information on Wikipedia of, what is JD, what does JD know that I don't know? Or, I don't mean it in a bad sense, but geez, I'm curious about this. This is something I've kind of noticed. I didn't know there was a term for it. There are people out there, again, who follow Instagram influencers. People make a lot of money. People make a lot of money on YouTube, and we feel like we have these relationships with them. Like, if we saw them, we would wave at them and they would wave back because we have this really close relationship with them. But in reality, they don't know us at all. And that's when you're starting when you're talking about the celebrity type figures. And on YouTube, the term celebrity is, I guess, it becomes much broader. When back in the day when you had really three television stations, you had ABC, you had CBS, and you had NBC. They were broadcast television stations nationally, and then you had your local affiliates. There wasn't a lot on. You had Hawaii Five-0 was a show that was on. There was Hee Haw, Lawrence Welk, and you really only had three choices, and that's just the way it was. And now with cable TV, there's this proliferation, and there's just a lot more out there. And obviously with social media, there's a whole lot out there as well. But I wanted to talk about this particular term, parasocial relationships, because I think with social media, it goes beyond the celebrity. And I'll give you some examples, or not specific examples, but what I mean by it. There are a lot of people that I'm connected with on Facebook, LinkedIn. I don't do a lot of Instagram or Twitter. But there are people I'm connected with that I follow that I've never met, never talked to. But I'm very interested in what they have to say. And I certainly form opinions about people based on the things that they're saying, right or wrong. And if the opinions are negative, if they're overly pushy and with respect to politics or something that I find offensive, I'll just disconnect, because you just don't need that in your life. But for the most part, it's people who have things of real interest to say, or they're funny. And again, I don't know these people. I feel like I do, but reality, I don't know these people. And if I were sitting on a plane or on a bus, or had an encounter with them, I would know more about them than they would know about me. I would sit there and it would be like this great, I would have this wonderful affinity towards this person, and they would be like, I don't know you, What do you mean you don't know me? I follow your posts. You're funny. And it would probably be a weird experience for them. But the point I'm trying to drive at with respect to this is we need to keep in mind that these sorts of relationships are out there. And I don't want to say guard against them because they're not all bad. But I think just being aware that we have these connections with people, and it's they're parasocial relationships are real, but they're not real relationships. I think is the point I want to drive home, and that just because we're following somebody, it doesn't mean that it's part of our network per se. It's part of our information. It's part of how we make decisions, but it's not part of our network. And just to keep that in mind as you're out there working with people, or as you're on social media, there's more and more of it. And I don't know, someone said once, again here, parasocial relationships. I watch a lot of sports, listen to a lot of sports radio, watch the programs. Colin Cowherd, who is I think he's on Fox Sports now. He was on ESPN for years. I like a lot of what he says. Some, I could do without, and that's, it's a parasocial relationship. But he once said that, don't worship people. People will always let you down. Worship, I'm not going to say worship things. Don't. These people that you have parasocial relationships with, you need to kind of question. You need to question them. Again, they're not real relationships. You have a real connection, and the notion of, it is a parasocial relationship, granted, but it's not a real relationship. And just to kind of keep that straight in your mind, that these people really don't know you, and you really don't know them. They're saying what they're saying because, Colin Cowherd or even political figures say what they're saying to drive home a point, get a vote, get you to buy something, keep you tuned in. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's absolutely who they are or what they're about. Certainly when you're talking about fictional characters, I always get a chuckle when people will quote fictional characters. The fictional character didn't say that. Well, they did, but that's not their original work. There's a team of writers that came up with that. So it's not, just because I'm trying to think of Joey on Friends said X, that's what Joey's all about. That's just his character, and a writer came up with that. Anyhow, not a lot to say on the topic other than that there's the notion of these parasocial relationships out there. We all have them. If you have a TV, if you have a radio, if you exist in an environment, and we all do. In high school, there were people that, the star on the football team. You didn't really know them. You just knew they were the star on the football team, and you could count on them for 4 yards when you needed 4 yards, or whatever it is, or that 3-pointer, or whatever it is. But they're not real relationships, and you need to keep that straight.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today, and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.